we welcome TSN insider Darren Dreger. Dregs, how we doing, buddy?
Yeah, we're doing well.
Awesome.
Thanks. Survived Halloween, got through the week. Everything's good. Good looking weekend
Nice.
ahead. No complaints.
No, do you dress up still, or we doing
doing the front door? What are you doing?
full sizers or?
Well, look, yeah, I've had my run. You know, I have adult children, so that's well behind me. But I actually enjoy the spirit of the day, and I do like seeing the little kids come up and their creativity and everything else. So I don't mind it. But we had the regional Leafs game last night, Leafs in Seattle. So I did not partake in the festivities of Halloween on the home front. Although I did see Jeff O'Neill in a Tooth Fairy costume on set. Yeah, on set. And,
Nice.
Wow.
Okay, let me just paint this picture for you fellas.
Thank you.
All right. So, like everything in TV, for the most part, there's got to be an entertainment attachment. So, you know, you rehearse, there's ideas, all of this. We were supposed to tape a segment for the pregame show. So I get in there for 3:00 Eastern. First guy I bump into is O'Neill in this ridiculous outfit, ridiculous. So we're in the green room, just Jeff and I. He's sitting in a comfy chair, not diagonally across from me. There's a table between us, nobody else. He's got his left leg strung over the arm of the chair.
Just chilling out.
Yeah, literally chilling out. So
yeah,
Cheryl Pounder walks into the green room and thank God decides, all right, I'm going to take a left turn. She had to drop her bag off in this little closet area room. I drop my pen and I go to pick up my pen and look over. And let's just say there was a wardrobe malfunction.
right.
Oh, dear.
And there was a vent in the undergarments of one Jeff O'Neill. And there it was. I'm like, oh, take your leg off the effing chair.
Yeah, you're gonna need to.
Yeah, and he doesn't move because I know Cheryl's going to sit in the chair right beside me, directly across from O-Dog.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Jeff, take your leg off the chair. And he goes, what? I'm like, take your leg off the chair. And now I'm in a panic. And then I'm like, bud, like you got a hole in your boxes and stuff is spilling everywhere, man.
Yeah, that's nice.
Jeffrey.
Anyway,
That's not how a lady sits, Jeff. That's we're gonna need you. The Tooth Fairy has better etiquette than that.
That was how I spent Halloween.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Well, that's good. I mean, your scar. I'm glad you're all right, which is good.
Can't unsee it, man. You just cannot unsee it.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, and there it is.
Yeah.
Apparently he's in the gym.
Most of it. That's what everyone else saw. I saw something else.
Yeah. Usually pay extra for that show. He's a good boy. So Darren, where else to start? But who would you say here we are? Who's in the hot seat? November 1st, as we get into it. Who would be in the hot seat?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't like doing it, but it's also very obvious. And it's obvious for a couple of reasons why we'd bring Jim Montgomery's name up with the Boston Bruins. Mostly, aside from the fact that they're floundering, they look lost, literally look lost out there. He's also in the final year of his contract. So that can only go one of two ways, right, guys? Yeah. I mean, you're either extending at some point or you're cutting bait. I always ask this question, though, when we're talking about coaches in the crosshairs. Who out there is better than Jim Montgomery? And that's really the question you have to come to terms with if you're management or ownership. But then you look at management, you see Cam Neely, you look at ownership, the Jacobs family, the Boston Bruins, the history of success in that market, and the history of volatility. They don't mess around. They don't play games. And it's too early in the year to watch this thing just go up in flames, right? So that's the primary reason why I'm watching what Boston has going on. I haven't dug into it. I don't have inside information to say that he's getting fired, but I do understand what level of speculation there is around it.
Two former Flames are there. Nikita Zadorov signed the monster, $30 million deal there. And Elias Lindholm, who we thought had a pretty rough year last year, still got paid by the Bruins. They've been a part of the issue. They've not been great, either of them.
No, you're right. And so you guys would have had a front row seat if we start with Zadorov. Hey, look, you can't play in the best league in the world unless you've got a high level of confidence and self-value. This guy always felt like he was at worst a 3-4, and in lots of situations as a free agent, probably thought that he was capable of playing top pairing. Well, we know that's not real. Now you look at where he's playing in Boston. For the most part, he's been a third pairing guy there, right? And
started on the first pair with McAvoy, but that quickly ended.
Yeah. And there were tons of teams with interest, tons of teams, not at the dollar value he ended up getting, because they were realistic where he'd probably slot in their lineup. And then you look at Lindholm, and there's better in him, right? We've all seen it. But I guess what I'm wondering is, what should you expect from Lindholm point-wise? Is he a 50-point guy, a 60-point guy? He's probably not an 80-point guy, is he? Like he's
the worst thing that
50,
happened to him
60.
was that year with Tkachuk and Gaudreau, where they all scored 40 and 2 of the 3 hit 100 points, because then everyone's expectations of what he is completely changed.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's a very capable player, and where they're weak is up the middle of the ice in Boston. And as Ray Ferraro, who played, center his entire life, explained on our podcast earlier today, you can be a very good centerman. You can be strong defensively. That's just part of the job. But you also have to have a higher level of creativity to make plays, right? And that's not wheelhouse for Lindholm. It really isn't. And then if you look up the middle of the ice in Boston, it gets young and it gets thin in that area of creativity. So there's trouble ahead there.
Yeah, and you start to look at it, and it was the Swayman thing, and some new faces, and
Marchand's negotiating an extension,
surgeries.
But interesting. Bottom 5 in goals against. They're scoring like they should. So interesting. And you know what? We were just looking at goals against there. Colorado, kind of the same story. Is there any way they can address a goal? Off seasons when you do it, but is there any kind of in midstream work that Joe Sakic and the Avs can do as far as net mining is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for sure. And if you look around the league, how many teams have an abundance of goaltenders, or, any that Chris McFarland and Sakic and company would view as an upgrade or improvement on what they already have. Yeah. So it appears internally that they're going to have to fight their way through it. But we kind of come back to the same thing with Colorado every time we have this conversation as a media base, right? And it's what they don't have access to in their lineup. They're so committed dollar-wise to players who aren't playing and not sure when these guys are playing. You look at Nichushkin, you look at Landeskog. Is he ever going to come back? If he comes back, I don't know if he can be the player that he was. He's been so far out of the game for so long. But that doesn't address your goaltending situation, right? And the problems that they've had on defense. But they're led by their superstar status. Makar and McKinnon and Rantanen, go down the list. But I think once they start getting healthy, especially on the back end, that'll take some of their stress off their goaltending. That's what they're hoping for.
Fellas,
we see Jersey tonight. Yeah. Are they favorite for you? Everyone was surprised they missed the playoffs last year, but they were top 3 in most futures for cup winning odds.
Yeah, I wouldn't. They're in that contending realm of favorites for me, right? I need to see more. I need to see the sustainability in whether or not their young guys are capable of shouldering the load. You can say health, but that applies to every team in the National Hockey League. You lose your best players like they did last year, and that puts you in the juice pretty quickly. So they do have the pieces, and Tom Fitzgerald added some others. And I'm going to watch. It's going to be interesting to see what he does closer in the second half, closer to the trade deadline, and who might be in play or who may not be in play. Don't know. But they look for real now, and I think that's growth and development of some of the young guys, right? But also a sense of security around them based on what Fitzy did defensively, and then obviously bringing in Jacob Markstrom and the experience that he provides to that New Jersey organization as well. So I need a bit more time, but at this point I'm buying more than I'm selling when I look at the Devils.
As for the Flames, it's 2 years away, but the more this team loses and looks less of a bubble team and more of a top 10 pick type of team, how are they approaching Rasmus Andersson now versus deadline versus the summer versus next year, his final year of his deal?
Yeah. I mean, the jury is out. It has to be, right? Let's find out what direction the Flames are going. I think that most of us, when the season started, thought that they had the potential to be better than what most of the prognosticators outside of the market, maybe outside of the conference, thought, right? Because of all the upheaval in Calgary, the work that Conroy did. Well, how can you be better? You can't be better, but you can be different. And maybe you can be good in being different. And I think that that's what we saw earlier. But I do think at best they're a middle of the pack team. And I'm talking about middle of the league. So does that put them on the outside of the playoff picture? Yeah, probably a little bit. But I do think that there's enough there that they're going to keep it interesting. So what is the transitional play here for ownership and management, right? Is it see how this year goes? And if it doesn't go great, then you have that conversation about Anderson and what direction you go. Because look, the one thing we've learned here, guys, as sexy as making that trade is at or around the trade deadline for us, because we talk about it, the value that you get in return is always better in the offseason, around the draft and
the
things
June
like
window,
that.
right?
Yeah, because now you're playing with a full deck. And, the cap teams aren't as stressed out by, complying and all of that. And I know when you get in the playoffs, the cap doesn't matter, but you still got to get there. And there's a distance between March 7th and the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I think more than this year is going to influence what happens in the offseason. But the offseason is what will tell the tale as to whether or not you try and solidify longer term guys like Anderson and other pieces that could otherwise bring you in a pretty considerable return.
Is there any kind of buzz? And Rhett and I we've kind of been playing the heel and poo-pooing the Four Nations Cup that's on the way. I know it's
month out from roster now.
Tickets went on sale and the rosters are coming up. And then in February, the games are going to be played. Is there buzz out there? Maybe it's because there aren't a lot of candidates here in Calgary. We know David and that is going to make it, but I just wonder about the roster construction.
Yeah.
Do you talk to players? How is, and you may not know, but what's your intel on how this is coming together? Because we're closer than I think maybe we think.
No, I think it's fair to say that, among player groups, for sure, there's a buzz. Somebody, I think it was Mike Johnson, brought up the idea of Connor Bedard as a 13th forward. And I ran that by some of the decision makers who are involved here with Hockey Canada and those from the NHL. And the message back was, we're not there yet. You guys are going to pick your teams and you're going to speculate and debate because that's what we do in Canada. It makes for good discussion. But then I was reminded by the same individual who's involved in the process that Sidney Crosby did not play on Canada's team as a 19-year-old. Mm-hmm. So is that firing it back over my bow to say, just pump the brakes here on Bedard?
Or was that a mistake? Because we saw them take a really old group to Nagano and to Italy, and Rob Zamner went to the Olympics. That was you can't look back and think that was smart.
Yeah, no, I get it. But that's part of the fun of the process too, right? For everybody involved. But, we mentioned last night on air, the possibility of Chris Tanev being a seventh defenseman. And the question was positioned in the moment, not when they have to submit their roster, but right now. And could you make a case for Tanev? Sure you could. All right. You guys have watched him closely. He's a tremendous defender, shot blocker, all those things, knows his role, that you can envision Canada saying, all right, the character, all of that, the experience. Yeah, we're bringing him in as our seventh guy. Well, I'm getting texts this morning from in the business people going, this guy is better than him. That guy is better.
Morrissey, Riley, Montour, Hamilton,
Petrangelo.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. I mean, how do you know I don't have any of those guys, or we don't have any of those guys in the top six? I mean, come on. But that, I think, Boomer speaks to the question, right? Yeah, there's a buzz. Most of it is media driven, but undoubtedly the players are talking about it and consuming it as well.
So two things for me. Why did we stop producing goalies? What happened? You're talking about Waugh to Brodeur to Luongo, Marc-Andre Fleury, especially Quebec. We're looking at the likes of Stuart Skinner, Connor Ingram, Logan Thompson, Aiden Hill. Like, what the hell? Like, the best 4 Russian goalies would all be Canada's number 1.
Yeah, well, and there was talk of Sam Montembeault, 2-3 weeks ago, and that was because he shut out the Toronto Maple Leafs to start the year.
Opening night, yeah.
So everybody's like, ooh, Sam Montembeault. Like, I mean, your point is well made, but it's also a question that I've asked historically of NHL managers and Hockey Canada. This isn't a now problem. Well, it is a now problem, but it's not something that has just recently surfaced, right? Of course, we've had tremendous Canadian goaltenders, Hall of Famers, Marc-Andre Fleury, Carey Price. If he didn't have the issues that he has, he'd probably still be starring in the National Hockey League. Canada has produced its share, but there has been an obvious void over the last
10 years,
10, 15. Yeah. And nobody can really answer why that is. Nobody really has a true understanding, but maybe it's a point of comparison too, because then you're looking over at the US and you're looking at Connor Hellebuyck, you're looking at Thatcher Demko, when he's healthy. I'm not as jammed up on the Canadian goaltending as most are. Maybe because, all right, their names aren't sexy when you compare them to Hellebuyck, but hey, Jordan Bennington was a pretty big part of the success story of the St. Louis Blues.
Aiden Hill too, right? Cup winners.
Aiden Hill, yeah, with Vegas. So I don't know. I'm curious because it's a debatable position. And when you make the comparison to some of the other federations participating, I'm not so sure Canada stacks up as being the favorite in that department. But
they'll have the worst goaltending. It's just that's it. It's just they're insulated by better teams in front of them. I mean, you got this decor of all stars. So yeah, hopefully you don't allow much.
So that's why you need better defenders. You need shutdown D.
That's right.
Let's go.
There it is. It all comes back around in the end. Yeah, it's. I mean, we love the game and we get all worked up about it. And like you say, you're having a conversation, you throw one thing out. Thing is, you're on a big soapbox there, Dreg. So you all some stuff, and then all of a sudden you're getting some blowback. But you say they're going to have the worst goaltending. On paper, on paper until the tournament starts, and then if somebody else goes in, and if whatever Vasilevsky or Sorokin or Shesterkin shits themselves, then all of a sudden, then it doesn't matter. So
Russia won't be in this tournament. That's the other thing. Fair enough. It feels like these international events are going to miss some moxie until Russia's off. How do they approach this?
I don't know, man. And shame on me for for not having asked that question recently. You get tired of the same answer when you're talking to, either the NHL or the IIHF, or if you want to look at the grander stage, the IOC and the Olympic Committee. The Olympic Committee by far is most open to the return of Russia. By far, let's open up the world stage and make it a true best on best. And I think the IIHF is inching towards that. But then it gets more interesting. So let's use the World Cup of Hockey. That is, so the IIHF still isn't necessarily, they're not sure that they're going to be a partner with the National Hockey League. And you know who doesn't care? The National Hockey League does not care.
Their event. It's not IIHF.
Yeah, and they would probably prefer to go on their own, right? Because then the National Hockey League can decide whether or not they want to dive into that cultural battle or not. And my sense is they probably would, because, again, when you're talking about some of the best players in the National Hockey League, well, there's a number of them that are of Russian descent. So you do want best at best, but it's gone quiet on that front. I would say in the last year, 6 months or so. And I think that has more to do with some of the off-ice back and forth between the NHL, the Players Association, and the IIHF.
Are people excited for it? Fans?
For the
Four Nations.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, it would have been criminal if we had not been able to watch Sidney Crosby play with Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, go down the list, right, of all these great talents. And even though Sid was terrific last night again, obviously he's in the late stages of his career. So I think from that perspective, that's what matters most to me. I'm always a fan of international hockey because it's one of the few times, now if we're doing the games, I'm going to be professional. I'm not going to be waving pom-poms. But if we're not, then it's one of the few times that I allow myself to cheer for my country. So that reduces me or elevates me to a pure hockey fan. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we like to see theoretically Bedard, McDavid, Crosby. Who wouldn't watch it?
I feel like they have to put Bedard in the team, if only for that, to have kind of.
And it's like, what is he not going to be good enough? Come on, like
it's not generation to generation exactly, but it's
close.
Like Sid the Kid to the next guy to. It'd be pretty cool to see.
Unreal.
Yeah. Speaking of McDavid, I know you have kind of tight ties to Edmonton. What was the holy shit moment like the other night when he went into the boards? They knew it was more. It
looks so innocuous at first glance, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why. My instant reaction was, okay, I need to watch this a bunch more times because, that's what we do, right? We're all video doctors. We want to try and identify and diagnose what we think the problem is. And you can see the left skate go into the boards, right at ice level. Okay, well, pretty obvious. It's either ankle or he jammed his knee or something along those lines. And then I'd say relatively soon, an hour or two after the game, the intel started to flow out that it was suspected to be a high ankle problem. And then the Oilers got in front of it, and they were quick to announce that, all right, well, he's going to make his way back to Edmonton. Well, he flew with the team in Nashville, then went back to Edmonton, and they had the posse of medical people there to do all the imaging and testing that was required. And then they come out and say, okay, well, Connor's out 2 to 3 weeks with an ankle injury. Okay, that aligns. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, well, we know how tricky high ankle injuries and the recovery can be. So do they mean 2-3 weeks, or could this be 4 to 6? Could it be a lingering? And then I think it was our pal Tom Gazzola. If somebody else tweeted this before Tom, apologies. His was the tweet that I read, that McDavid had skated yesterday morning in Edmonton. I'm like, what is going on? So pretty obviously it was a test drill. And one of the tricky things, as you guys know, when it comes to recovering from the high ankle is, what if you do this and aggravate it, right? It could be a turn. It can be a toe pick. I don't think McDavid has ever toe picked in his life, but, something like that. So I think that he wanted to test drive it from a pain threshold perspective, see how it feels, see if it stiffens up, all of that. But the intel this morning, and don't take this as gospel, as hard news, is he could play inside a week. Again, I'm sure he'll be reassessed today and over the course of the weekend. They play on Sunday. That feels like a stretch, but
2 to 3 weeks seems really conservative. If we're talking about Calgary on Sunday, what do you? Geez.
I mean, that feels like a stretch, and I think that's exactly what Edmonton was trying to do. Let's just push it to the outside, because even as he left the ice, he didn't look like he was laboring to get off.
It's not like you couldn't put weight on it.
No,
there was something wrong, but it wasn't.
Exactly. There was some pain, but he got off the ice on his own kind of engine there. So
because it was similar, obviously not like when Drew Doughty went into this. Oddly enough, it kind of came in and then somehow was 90 degrees into the sideboards. Yeah. He was not getting up and skating off under his own will. So
you don't seem to miss him, though. They were pretty good last night. I don't know.
Leon's always good against Nashville. Did you see those numbers? Like he's goal a game against Nashville's whole career. It's crazy.
Yeah. And again, I don't think there's much to it other than the obvious. So, anybody who submits that Draisaitl is better when Connor isn't there, I mean, some of that is backed up by data historically. I think it's more along the lines of a leader on the team taking responsibility for the job that he has to do. All right, we can't lean on 97, so it's my job to play better and play better than I've been. And
so with Malkin and Crosby a ton. Whenever Crosby was hurt, he'd elevate.
Exactly right. It's
all you guys dogging it the rest of the time. It's just like, okay, now I get to talk a little more.
Same thing.
What was your so what is it, like Langenberg or Esterhazy? Where when you're a young boy, when you're trick or treating, what's your favorite coming out of the pillowcase, the sack when you get home?
Ooh, that's a good question. See, I did all my trick or treating rural Saskatchewan, right? So it was either the skunky half rotten apple, which you paid a price for that one. Let's just say. And I was ruthless. My wife and I were walking the dog this morning, and we're looking around our neighborhood, and I'm like, thankfully, but I think the whole trick process of trick-or-treating has been taken out of society. We don't do it anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like, not soaping windows, letting air out of tires, throwing eggs, all the nonsense that we used to do. Yeah. And God forbid if you gave me an apple and you left your vehicles unlocked.
Yeah. They were getting the apple back?
No, I once stuffed a dead squirrel under the floor mat of a vehicle in the back seat. There's no way they found that thing for weeks, if not months.
They would have smelt it first.
Yeah, it's spring and that thing's still in there, finally starting to thaw out. I didn't know you were that kind of guy. I thought you were a sweet boy, Darren Dreger.
Yeah. I have parts of me, but not always. I had a mean streak too, Boomer.
Have yourself a fine weekend, buddy. Good to talk to you again. Be good.
All right, guys. You too. Thank you.
There's our boy, Darren Dreger, joining us here on the Crystal Waters Plumbing and Heating Insider Hotline.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long-form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.